Good morning, lovelies, and welcome to today's vlog. Today is Wednesday, the time is past 11, and spring is officially here, and it's a perfect time to bake and do activities you enjoy and love. Unlike during winter when the weather is so gloomy and you barely see people around, like during spring, the flowers are so beautiful, everywhere is just bright and bubbling, and so lately I've been feeling like baking, and so I'll be baking some Nigerian meat pies and basically just cooking and doing stuff I enjoy and like to do. So come along with me as we get this vlog started. Today I'll be making moi moi for breakfast. We'll be having it with custard, and then I'll start on with the baking of baking meat pies. Like I said earlier, usually we have the meat pies as snacks, or we use it for breakfast. We can use it to pair with tea or hot chocolate or coffee. Just depends on what you're craving. So yeah, that's what I'll be doing today. In peeling the beans, this is the fastest way I know how. I just use the blender to peel off the skin from the beans, and it's just really fast, quick, and easy. So that's how I usually do it. And I'm using my old blender for it because I don't want to spoil the blade of my new blender. So if you're going to try this, I'd suggest don't use the blender you use, like your favorite blender. If you have an old blender, you can use it because the beans can spoil the blade of your blender. So yeah. Today's pep talk is about forming the habit of reading. I like to read, but it can get really difficult sometimes, especially now that I have a son. and I have all these activities I need to do and all of that. So it can really be difficult to create time to read. One thing I've told myself this year is to at least read one book every month. And I was able to do that last year. I think I read, I'm not sure of the number now, but I read a couple of books last year and it was really good. I mean, reading is something that we all need to, like, it's a habit that we all need to cultivate, right? I remember the first time I really encountered the Holy Spirit, like when I got to know about the person of the Holy Spirit, like it's not a whooshy or it's not a feeling, it's actually a person, was when I read the book by Benny Hinn, Good Morning, Holy Spirit. I was given the book to read and I was just reading it. That day, it's so clear in my mind, like I remember it so clearly. I was in the room and I was reading the book. I was living at the parsonage. I was in a university then, so I was living in the fellowship parsonage at that time. So I was in one of the room, I was reading and I was having, I wouldn't even call myself someone who had like a relationship, a close relationship with God back then. I was just trying because I was surrounded with church people, right? So I was given that book by my pastor to read and I was reading the book. And that day, in fact, it was a bright, sunny afternoon and I was having an issue, a quarrel with a friend of mine, and the person was in the room. Like we were both having serious, heated conversation that day. But I told myself that I was going to finish the chapter I was reading. Funny thing happened. As I was reading that book, all of a sudden, it felt like someone was pulling my knees to the ground, like literally dragging my knees to the ground. Like it was so real. It was so, I can't even explain. And I was telling myself, let me just finish this chapter. Let me just finish this chapter. It was as if the person was pulling my knees to the ground to pray. And I remember very well when I was reading that book, like I was so blown away by the encounter that Benny Hinn had, with the Holy Spirit. And I was just reading the book. I was really invested in reading the book, right? And so I told myself I was going to finish that chapter. But that person, by the way, he was still there. He was still arguing with me. And I'm here trying to concentrate to finish the chapter I was reading. And all of these things was just happening all at the same time, The funny thing is, I was telling myself, okay, when I finish reading this chapter, I'll go and pray. But like the force, it was a serious, it was literally as if someone was pulling my knees to the ground. And it got to a point I could not take it anymore. Like I couldn't handle the move anymore. And the next thing I heard was my knees like literally slamming on the ground, like my knees on the ground. And I was singing. I started first by singing. And I remember my pastor said to me after everything that they actually thought it was a bird that was singing. That my voice sounded like a bird and it sounded so close to them in the living room. Meanwhile, I was in the room, like the room was very, very far away from where my pastor was. And anyways, I'm just sharing this experience because that encounter was one that I went back to God after many years, when I strayed away. I went back to God and I was like, I had this experience. What was it about? And it was just a whole conversation that I don't want to have today. But the point of this story is that I read a book about the Holy Spirit. That book introduced me to the person of the Holy Spirit. And that's what reading will do for you. Like when you form the habit of reading, it will give you secrets. Like there are so many secrets that people cannot just share with you, but they can write it in a book. And that's where you can find those germs, right? So I want to encourage you to join me to form the habit of reading. I know it can be hard, but sometimes I tell myself 10 minutes, I'm going to give 20 minutes. Sometimes I tell myself I'll finish a chapter and I just get through with it. I try to do it. Sometimes I do my readings at 9 before bedtime. I have this reading lamp that I use. So I want to encourage you to form the habit of reading. it doesn't necessarily have to be a Christian literature. It can be of any interest, something you're doing. It could be about your business, but just form the habit of reading. It will really, really expose your mind to many things. And you can just create little time during the day to reading, it will really help you. All right, that's it for today's pep talk. Let's go back to the vlog.